She's Katie Montgomery. He's Justin Joseph. These best friends are serving subpoenas to bad advice weekly with Wrong Way Forward, the advice column reboot you never knew you needed. Sparks fly, and so does the hilarity. Now, here's Katie and Justin.
All right, everybody. Hi, and welcome back to this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. We were just laughing before we started production here because we were talking about our first professional fight, and Katie was trying to help herself remember about what the fight was about. And I said, she was looking through her text. I said, just search for the word fuck. You'll find it real quick.
Justin, I can't believe you just dropped an F-bomb. I do think everyone needs a little bit of kind of background. So Justin and I are trying to be a little bit more savvy with our marketing, put together some clips, and he was putting together a clip. He sent it to me. It was approved. He did a few edits. I approved. And I'm literally on a bus in DC. I have no access to my computer.
Well, let me stop you there. Let's play the clip first. So as Katie is right, whenever we do professional marketing, we look at it. She did approve it. And I said, well, this could use a little edit, but let's play the clip and then we'll come back and talk about it on the other side.
Dog is not a child, and you're definitely alert.
As they move forward and possibly see sleeveless Frenchie.
And I thought another good example is when you came in to visit me. I mean, a dog is not a child, and you're definitely allergic to dogs, but you really don't want to be around dogs, and that's my child. If you're seeing a fly around my head, I'm not Mike Pence. It literally is. We've been on this podcast for an hour, and suddenly this fly cannot get off my face. So anyway, back to what I was talking about originally. You don't like to be around dogs, and like the dog is my child. So in many cases, this is kind of what you were in the middle of last time you were with me.
Well, but I have to tell you, we're very, very good friends. In fact,
Right.
We're best friends. And so I did say your dog was cute. I let the dog sit next to me. I would say, hey, doggy.
So stop there. So you heard the part where she said, I'd let the dog sit next to me. And Katie, you can pick it up from there.
So I'm on a bus in DC. I have no access to my computer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, our new piece of social media, this really kind of fancy edited clips up. I'm very excited. And I see it. And Justin has inserted a picture of me in sweats, looking like a roly-poly, not posed at all, on the couch next to that dog. And I lost my ever-living mind. And I wrote him, Justin, if you don't delete that post ASAP, I will never podcast with you again. Get rid of that fat pic of me on the couch ASAP. I'm not joking. I am pissed. And then that wasn't enough. I wrote like super angry ! And he writes, KK, it was fast, but I'll delete it. And I'm like, why did you do that? I'm really hurt. You know me. I'm sensitive about that stuff. That was mean, really mean. And I'd like to say a little bit of wrong way forward on my side. I think I overreacted a little bit. But there is a general rule on this earth that you do not post unattractive pictures of your friends. And I think this was particularly the wrong way forward because I approved, not once, but twice, the content that was going on. And Justin snuck around and threw this highly unattractive, disgusting picture of me into the mix without my permission, without my approval. And he did it, I think, from a purely selfish point of view.
Okay, so now it's time to respond. So Katie chose to read the text that came across at 11:14 that day. At 9:18, 2 hours earlier, I said, I made one tiny edit to the clip I posted. Bye-bye. And she went, okay. And then she said, where did you post? I'm doing a billion things, so I don't know. I wouldn't know the difference. I said, perfect. Have a good day. I thought this was resolved. And then the 2 hours later was when the stream of text started coming.
Because
Having said
a
that,
tiny little edit. I mean, you know me. So I think I just think it was so unthoughtful. And we know in this culture, like right now I'm being videotaped. You're constantly under scrutiny about your looks. And, if I can control a roly-poly picture, on the couch, I'd like to do that. And, a tiny little edit, it reminds me of I'm watching Love is Blind right now. And there's this one guy who says, yeah, I've got a few small tats. This guy's got 2 full arm sleeves and 1 full leg. Like, that's just lying. There's a tiny edit. of the most unattractive picture I've taken of you in the last 10 years.
Well, you are not wrong by any stretch of the imagination. And
That it was an unattractive picture.
Well, that's where I'm going to get in a minute. I did not think it was a terrible picture, but you're not wrong. It was, I was looking for the humor value in it because it really was funny, as you said in that clip. I let your dog sit next to me, and there's this picture with you reading, and Beckham, our dog, is just sitting looking like, what am I doing here? So I thought it was funny, and that was really the reason I posted it. But having said that, I did apologize. I think it was completely wrong. It won't happen again. But I do think it brings up a larger conversation when this is just interesting because as a male getting into my 50s, that really was freeing because I cared less about how I look. Because, I was trying to explain this to someone the other day. There was a day when I would go into a club or a bar and I would literally worry about, like, are people looking at me? Am I attractive? Now when I go in, I'm like, I'm just the old guy in the bar. No one gives a shit. You still, is this a woman thing or is this a Katy thing?
Well, I think, first of all, you have a partner. And so you are happily married and situated. Who knows what's going to happen in my life, but I think there's still that kind of opportunity. So I know that we are still a looks obsessed culture and that people look first and then get to know you later. I've had a lot of different stages in my life. I don't necessarily want ex-boyfriends finding this unattractive picture of me. That's my ego getting in the way.
Sure.
And I felt what I think hurt the most, Justin, is that I feel like I'm really pushing myself. Like I'm not editing any video of me. I don't have a poker face. In fact, sometimes I make some really disgusting faces in response to Wrong Way Forward. And I think I was being very vulnerable in the fact that you pushed it one level past. But again, it was the social norm of we don't do that. Like I just hosted my niece and 3 of her friends who were visiting colleges in DC. And I said, where's a group photo of y'all? Y'all been all over DC. I haven't seen it on social media. And they're like, we haven't taken one that we all approve. I mean, so you just broke like a really common community standard. And I would be interested to know if the audience agrees is that, you generally have to get permission before posting something in a very public place, particularly if it doesn't automatically resonate as that's a great picture.
No, I 100%. This is not something the audience needs to weigh in on. It was wrong. I apologized, and it won't happen again. And it's funny because when you and I are together out in the real world with other people, we're all the same way. We'll take a picture, and it's like if one person doesn't like it, it doesn't get posted.
Yeah, it's just when you do one little change behind my back. I promise I'll get over it. I promise.
All right. Well, that was our first professional fight. I agreed that I was wrong. And on that note, I was also at dinner recently with my sister-in-law, and she loves the show, and she was saying how entertaining it is. She did thought that we got over our skis on the Oprah episode where we took on Oprah's advice and following your gut, and said she didn't agree. And I thought in my head, well, if one person thinks that, there's probably a lot of people who may or may not agree with things that you and I are talking about here. And that was particularly truthful when on last week's episode, I brought up the whole issue with the trailer. Do you know what the trailer is, Katy?
No. Is that like an RV park?
No, trailer is what we're calling Travis and Kelsey. That's their combined, like Bennifer. It's trailer, which we can discuss whether that's an appropriate name or not. But
I'm racking my brain. I get Taylor. Oh, trailer, Travis. Okay,
and
yes.
Taylor. So
okay.
Last week I made the mistake of commenting on the trailer, and I said, for those of you who listened to last week's episode, that I thought it was emasculating that Travis Kelsey had underperformed this season so far, and that, in my opinion, it was because he had got engaged and his focus had now become on his fiance, et cetera. And I said, that's just, for me, that was the wrong way forward. Well, you would have thought that I had just come after her and said what a terrible, awful person she was, because the emails and the texts from college friends just came flying. And I was swift-boated, frankly.
You were.
And I was. And so let me just read a few of these emails to call me out and correct me. And then I'll come back on the other side. And like I did for you, I will apologize for taking the trailers on. Justin,
we need to rename our podcast Justin Apologizes.
Yeah, pretty much. Justin's Wrong Way Forward. How about that? As a lifelong Chiefs fan, I just wanted to thank you for your personally jinxing us. My husband said maybe it's just one loss, but then I hear your "he's her bitch" comment, and now I'm convinced you've cursed the franchise. Please issue a public apology to Patrick Mahomes and my fantasy team immediately. Here's another. Justin is the president of my local Swiftie Legal Alliance. I'd like to serve you with a cease and desist for emotional defamation of Taylor's happiness. You have been found guilty on 2 counts: projecting and being emasculation adjacent. Katy, thank you for being the only adult in the room. Love and light. Okay, she hates me.
She hates you.
That was our lost viewer for last week. Last one I'll say is, Justin, bro, you talk like Travis gave up his helmet for a hairdryer. The man caught 7 passes last week. I've been married 12 years, and if my wife even looked at me the way Taylor looks at him, I'd retire from everything. Yours in delusion, an emasculated but happy husband. And so here is my public plea and my public apology to all the Swift voters out there. I probably shouldn't have said what I said. Yeah, I wish him all of the happiness, and I hope they're happy for a million years, and I hope his football career flourishes, but just not against our Denver Broncos. There you go, Katy. Was that a sufficient public whipping for me?
I think so. And I think that was the right way forward. You apologized. You didn't apologize with excuses. And you ended on a positive note. And I'm seeing growth, Justin. That's great.
All right. When we come back on the other side, we're going to take up one of the hottest topics out there right now. It's called tipflation. You've been there. You've gone to pick up a sandwich that you ordered at a Subway. They flipped the screen around and they want a 20% tip. On the other side, we're going to talk about, has tipflation gone too far? We'll be back on the other side.
You've been listening to Wrong Way Forward, where bad advice goes to die and then gets resurrected just so we can roast it again.
That's right, Katy. Nobody's off limits, not the gurus, not the influencers, and definitely not Oprah.
Sorry, Oprah.
If you're enjoying the chaos, hit like and subscribe and come back every Thursday for new episodes.
Have a new topic or some disastrously bad advice you want to dissect? Email wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. Include your contact info.
Now back to Wrong Way Forward.
Roasting the worst advice ever. Welcome back to the Katy and Justin podcast.
And we're back. And Justin teased this, but we're going to be talking about tipping and tipflation. And we got a great viewer email, and I'd just like to take a chance to read that. During COVID times, we all learned that you should tip your waiter, even on take orders, as there was no table service. Now that COVID is long over, there are still carry-out places to order food. Even Starbucks does this, and they want me to tip on takeout. I order online by myself. I drive to them to get my food, drink, and I drive myself home. Pray tell, why should I still need to tip? It's crazy to me. Or am I being cheap? Thoughts?
What are your thoughts,
Justin?
Katy? Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Well, a couple of things. I am definitely of the mindset that tipping has gotten way out of hand, and in many ways, it's given me a lot more permission structure to just skip it. When someone flips a screen around me, my instinct immediately is just to skip it. Now, I will say this: like, I found a new coffee place by my house, and the first time I went there, I ordered, and the lady was very nice, and she flipped the screen, and I thought, oh, fuck, I've got to tip her. So I hit $1. And so now the weakling in me, now I just order ahead so I can just run in and pick it up and then I don't have to tip her. So,
well, it's interesting. Everyone's talking about this. Like yesterday, I was having lunch with a good friend and he's like, it's everywhere. It's Starbucks. I eat the skinny turkey sandwich at Potbelly, even Potbelly, but even Uber, and Uber already has surge pricing. And so it's one of these things. And my friend and I were talking is that minimum wage is not enough for people to live.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this strange thing that it's like these people are in customer service roles. They're probably underpaid. It's hard to make a living. And so I feel sometimes like those who can should give. But then at the same time, I'm like, is it my responsibility? And what my friend and I were talking is we would much rather pay 50 cents more for a coffee or go ahead and upcharge a little bit, like build in the prices and take care of your staff.
Mm-hmm.
Because my big question too is, where is this money going to? Like, have we seen that at the end of the day that those, private coffee shops that swing around the iPad or, something like Potbelly, is that money evenly going to everyone? How is that being distributed? How is that being taxed? How is that being processed? And it's very frustrating when someone's doing their job and expect, an extra tip.
Mm-hmm.
They are not being paid based on being in a tip business.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And, I thought the viewer email was right on when they said, because you remember during COVID, they started adding the restaurant, I forget, the kitchen appreciation section. It was like a 3% upcharge for all of the bills because to appreciate the kitchen staff that were putting their lives at risk during COVID to come in and cook. And, then I think everybody was paying anything. They were happy just to have takeout food. Well, I was at a restaurant last night, one of my favorite ones, and that gratuity or that upcharge is still there. And so a lot of these restaurants have not taken that away. They have built it in, to your point, into the cost of business. I hate that I see it because it just irks me. I'd rather, like you said, I don't want to know that I'm paying this new fee that I didn't have to pay 5 years ago. But they are built. I'm with you. I'd rather they put it in the expense of the food, the total charge I get. And, we're creatures of habit. We've done 20% tipping for as long as I can remember. Don't try and change that on me now. It makes me nuts.
Well, and we know some cultures are not tipping cultures. I mean, if you go, for example, to France, that is built into the wage, it's built into the costs, and it is very kind of abnormal to tip. To give a token euro or two is just considered a nice gesture if the service is above and beyond. I don't think America's going to change anytime soon in terms of a tipping culture. And I would think it would need to, because, there's been times when I've showed up at a hotel and I don't carry cash.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to say, what is your Venmo? Because I'm so uncomfortable with not exchanging.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the big question here is it the wrong way forward about how we're processing this?
Okay.
I would love for people to kind of deep dive is, if you feel like you shouldn't tip, but you're tipping anyway, what is the motivator for that? Is that guilt?
Guilt.
Is that values that you think, we should help others and we're in a sense of community? Are we making assumptions about the person on the other side who's in that customer service role? What is, if we don't think we should tip, why are we tipping? And I think that's the wrong way forward is not trying to kind of delve into that and kind of understand that better. Because when I have these conversations with people, they keep saying, if I don't tip, am I an a-hole?
Mm-hmm.
So people are really terrified about having absolute strangers label them as jerks.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that interesting?
It is interesting. And I also think for me, during COVID, when real estate was depressed and I was watching pennies, I remember Josh and I got into a big fight because he would go grocery shopping and, if we would want turkey for turkey sandwiches and he'd come home with, the premium brand. And I'm like, you need to be shopping Kroger. And for those of you who don't live in Denver, Kroger's like the store's brand. And I'm like, it was important to me to make an effort. My parents always taught us, be good stewards of your money. They're very religious. They really called it the Lord's money, but be good stewards of the money. And so that was a lesson Josh and I had a lot of discussion about. And so to bring that back to tipping, for me, even though it's $1 here, $1 there, it still for me comes down to, is that really being a good steward of money? Could that money be better spent elsewhere, be given elsewhere to a church, to a charity, et cetera? And so that for me is the thinking process. But to your point, that's the front side of it. The back side of it is, yes, I absolutely feel guilty. And, I'm looking over my shoulder to see, is someone going to watch me tip this person, skip it? Or, the other day we went to we weren't going to a fundraising event. We had a drink at a bar before and she took forever to get to us. She finally got to us. We ordered 4 drinks. She flipped the little kiosk around and she wanted 20% on 4 drinks that were overpriced. And I'm like, I felt badly. I gave her a tip, but I tipped her like $1 a drink as opposed to what would have been $2.50 a drink. And of course I look around my shoulder because I'm with people I don't necessarily know that are coming to the fundraising event with me. And I'm like, do I look like a cheapskate? But those are the kinds of pressures that I think that the whole kiosk flip is meant to do. It's meant to pressure you into tipping.
Yeah, and it's brilliant, and it works a lot better than having just a plastic jar that says throw in tips, and it's really working towards people moving into a digital age where they're not carrying cash,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think the wrong way forward is thinking about this and thinking too much about what people think about this.
Mm-hmm.
and instead trying to be consistent in your kind of tipping culture would probably be the right way forward. Um, I think what's interesting is I would have everyone kind of step back and think, why do you think that you're a jerk? Why do you think people think you're going to be cheap? And why does that matter to you?
Oh,
Right.
interesting.
And so I think that's probably the real question here. And that's why I think this kind of tipflation is really hitting all of us and it's becoming such a topic of conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And one last statistic, when I was getting ready for this, I read about there really is a direct impact of tipflation, and the statistic I read was it's 38% of consumers in 2024 said they tip restaurant servers 2020. Let's try that again. 38% of consumers in 2024 said they tipped restaurant servers 20% or more, which is down from 42% back pre-COVID. And so there is a cost to all of this tipping because it's actually hurting the service industry more because people are tipping less because of this exact conversation.
I think that's a great point.
So, all right, when we come back on the other side, we're going to talk about boobages. Katie, maybe
That's
you can
right.
elaborate what that means.
So we're going to talk about the boob shelf and the boob shelf for one particular person. And is that the wrong way forward?
We'll be back on the other side. Thanks for streaming Wrong Way Forward, the weekly reminder that advice is usually free for a reason. We call out bad advice wherever it hides: boardrooms, break rooms, and even book clubs.
Enjoying this dumpster fire? Like, subscribe, and check back every Thursday for new episodes. Want us to roast your favorite piece of nonsense? Email us at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to include your contact info. We're not psychic, just judgmental. And now, back to Wrong Way Forward.
Roasting the worst advice ever. Welcome back to the Katy and Justin.
Hi, everyone, and we're back. And I'm going to talk about a term called boob shelf. If you want to kind of think about this and get an image in your head, the first person who comes to mind for me is Lauren Sánchez. She has some large breasts. She pushes them up using corsets, cinching, and certain push-up bras to where she has created an actual shelf. So imagine a bookshelf. You could actually, place your set of encyclopedias. I'm a kid of the 80s, so we
And
have
now
a
to
set
mimic you, I want to vomit in my mouth.
Exactly. And I was in Oregon with my three best guy friends from law school catching the OU OSU game. And I said, listen, I am just seeing these pictures of Lauren Sánchez and, own your sexuality, dress how you want to. But I think there's a wrong way forward in terms of showing your boobs in certain places. And two of my friends have two children apiece, and they're both boys. And I said, what do you think they would feel of walking their mother down the aisle if she had a boob shelf? Like if her boobs were out and they had
Is
to
boob shelf really a word, or did you make that up?
No, I actually read it because I just was like, what is going on? It's really a phenomenon. I
I've
mean,
never heard it. That's
I
funny.
am not small breasted, but I can tell you I can't hold a set of encyclopedias across my boobs. But there is a way to prop them and out them that literally you can imagine like a shelf coming off.
But
I
let
was
me
like,
stop you there. These are paid for boobs, right? I mean, I don't know.
mean, that would be my assumption. And I think it's a very good assumption. That is, a quick internet search will say yes, that they have been augmented.
Okay.
But I think she's also doing a lot in terms of her lingerie and her clothing and the cinching of the waist that helps create the shelf. But I said, would that make your boys feel uncomfortable? And they said, yeah, pretty much. And then I just started thinking, where are boobs, like putting them out? And we can talk about men. We could talk about, assless pants. We can talk about showing your pecs. But where are boobs appropriate? And I started thinking, okay, boobs are appropriate at strip clubs. Boobs are appropriate. Like, I'm talking about like boobs out. Boobs are probably okay at a burlesque club, maybe in a bikini, maybe for a Halloween costume. But since when did we start putting our boobs out at weddings, at federal government events like the inauguration, even going into space? Shouldn't there be like a utility of a costume, not kind of. And so for me, it's what is the wrong way forward? And am I crazy to think, I just don't necessarily want to see, you know, propped up boobs and lace, bustiers when I go to a government federal building.
Yeah, no, and we have to be not we don't have to be, but we try and be very careful here because we're essentially commenting on how a woman looks, right? And so that always can be, and Justin will get the brunt of that.
Oh no, I mean I'm doing that. I'm very sensitive to that too.
Yeah, but I think you're right. When they did the Blue Origin space launch and their outfits were all zipper up the middle, and some of them zippered a lot lower than others. Let's just put it that way. And the boob shelf was in full effect. I'm with you. I just, I guess there's a lot of pressure, especially with people with that kind of money, to look a certain way. And, have you ever seen the picture of Lauren Sánchez before she did plastic surgery and after? Can you see that? I'll put it up for our viewers. Can you see that, Katie?
Yeah, let me check.
I mean, so it's just these people are redoing their faces and their bodies, and that's okay.
Yes.
Because I think that when you live in that world, there's so much pressure to look a certain way. But the problem is the downriver effect on that is people like me and you feel pressure to do certain things as well. And I think that's the wrong way forward. And that's the problem with this phenomenon.
Agreed. And I think, it makes me feel, kind of going back to kind of old fashioned and, it took us, 2 hours to walk to school in the snow kind of comment. But, I want to go to work and have some kind of decorum about, I want to be able to attend kind of a federal event and there be some type of decorum in terms of dress.
You keep bringing up this federal event. Am I missing something here? Is there a specific reference?
There's the famous picture of Lauren Sánchez attending the inauguration.
Oh, yes.
Where she had her boob shelf on display. And there's the famous picture of Mark Zuckerberg checking it out.
Which, how do you not? And it's not even in I'm sure for some men it's in a salacious way, but it's just gross.
Well, and I think
said the gay man.
Yes, exactly. But it's the same thing. Like, I wouldn't want to see men's pecs, at a certain event. I wouldn't.
A sleeveless shirt, as my mother would say.
Yes, yes. A singlet for a man, in my preference, is for basketball players, marathon runners.
Well, singlet? Whoever called it a singlet? It's called a
that's
shirt.
The term for sports, because I'm the expert in sports.
Well, for gay people, it's called a sleeveless shirt, and if you had good arms, you'd wear them. And back in the day, I used to wear those.
I know, Justin, and with your gold chain, it killed me every time.
Do you remember we were in Vegas one time?
Yes.
And I was my favorite thing would be to dress up a sleeveless. So I'd put on a beautiful pair of khakis, expensive black shoes, and a black sleeveless shirt, and I just thought I was in it to win it.
And I just hated it. I thought it was just a terrible look.
Do you remember I was meeting you in Vegas and I walked to the casino and you about fell out of your chair?
Well, I said, that looks so gay. And Nikki, one of our best friends said, he is gay. And I'm like, good point. Yeah. That tracks. He's dressing for the part. Good for him.
Yeah. And Katie,
but when you showed up in that outfit, I was like, ugh, that's horrible.
Yeah. And so that's it evokes those same emotions for you with the boob shelf.
It does. And I just, I kind of be like, proud and loud if you, are in a bikini on the beach, proud and loud if you work in a titty club, proud and loud if you're in a burlesque show, proud and loud, maybe if you want to go crazy on Halloween, but, maybe not for, formal solemn events and for, very kind of historic rites of initiation. I mean, what's going to happen if I just keep imagining, what if she's Catholic? I'm making something up. She's Catholic and one of her sons has a baby and she's there for the christening. Is she going to have her boob shelf out for the christening? Again, this is my, old fashioned kind of sounding. And again, she has every right to dress however she wants, but is it the wrong or right way forward? How I'm thinking. And is it the wrong way forward? Where do you pull out the boob shelf?
Well, let me bring it back full circle from the A block, and this is why it could be wrong way forward. Do you think there's a direct correlation between the boob shelf and women who do the boob shelf out there and bringing them back to how you feel when, when that picture was put out there? Because Lauren Sánchez looks one way, Do you feel the pressure to look a different way? And when you don't, it brings up these feelings. Do you think there's a correlation out there?
So just like I don't like, sleeveless shirts and gold chains on boys, that's not what I aspire to look like. I don't personally find that attractive.
But it's a pressure to look good.
I think it's a pressure to look good. And I think, I feel terrible because I'm being so hypocritical now. I'm talking about a woman's looks, and then I don't want people to talk about how I look. And I know that I'm probably being judged more harshly than you because I am a woman and there are expectations about how we look.
Mm-hmm.
But, I also want to be known. Like if I ideally could say, how does somebody see you? I would want them to be like, she's smart, she's funny, and she's cute, so there would be a piece of my, of what I look like, but I would really want people to kind of talk about my personality and my skills. Whereas unfortunately in our current society, and there is no need for Lauren Sánchez to bend to that, we're all talking about her boob shelf. We're not talking about, is she funny? Is she smart? Is she curious? Is she all around interesting? We're talking about a boob shelf.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. This is something we will revisit because I think this is going to touch a lot of buttons one way or the other. The last thing we want to talk about is, we have our 10th episode now, and we have got a lot of traction out there. And as part of getting traction, how many countries and cities are we in?
Give me 1 second. I got to put the glasses on, but I can give you that.
We've got a lot of traction. We've got a lot of regular viewers. We're getting viewer emails. But as part of that, the way podcasting works is you get more traction, you get sponsor offers. And so, whereas now in the middle of our various blocks, you hear Katy and I talking about it, we have opportunities for paid advertisements in the middle. And to date, we have turned down paid advertisements because we didn't really think that they necessarily fit with the brand, et cetera. But we wanted to play one that for the life of us, we could not figure out why these people would want to advertise. We'll play them and then we'll talk about it on the other side to wrap up.
Yep.
The Christian. Hi, this is Bishop Kevin Sweeney, host of the podcast Beyond the Beacon. Join me as we unravel and discuss the mysteries of our faith, of the church, of living as Catholic Christians.
So I'm confused as to why Kevin Sweeney, who I'm sure is a lovely bishop and who wants to talk about Christian, would want to be right after the boob shelf conversation.
Well, maybe going back to the stats, we are in 20 countries and 240 cities. So, Bishop Kevin might just be real savvy. But I think this has racked my brain too, because I would not necessarily say we're of the same genre and topics. But I wonder if, again, I find algorithms and AI and technology so interesting. I wonder if they just picked up that we were both Jesuit grads. And I know we've mentioned purgatory, and I think we both talked about Catholicism just in terms of like our experiences and how we were raised. Our parents were both really committed to the church, and that was a significant part of our childhood and upbringing. If, Father Kevin's like, boob shelves be damned, I found 2 Catholics. I don't know.
Well, yes, we figured that was probably not the right way forward. And so we are going to politely decline Father Kevin's lovely invitation to appear as a sponsor on our podcast. We had a few interesting ones, but we'll continue to keep you updated as those come along. Well, Katy, that's another episode. We'll be back next week where we're going to talk about bachelor parties.
That's right. And so if anybody has any ideas of, yay, nay, right way forward, wrong way forward, we'd love to hear from you.
That's all for this week. We'll see you guys next week on Wrong Way Forward. All right, that's a wrap on this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. Remember, the only thing worse than taking bad advice is giving it.
If you've liked what you've heard, like, subscribe, or follow us wherever you stream podcasts. And if you've got a topic or need some advice we'll probably regret giving, email us at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward.